Good morning students, welcome to SAMEEKSHA series. This is content extraction from The Hindu, that is today's Hindu, 21st of September 2022. Please note that this is not a giving addition to the so-called your knowledge. This is just highlighting which content has to be used in which part of your GS papers, right? So many of us will be wasting our time in knowing what are the things that we have to take from the Hindu for our answer writing. So just follow my trend or follow my subject so that it will be helpful for substantiating of your answers in your mains, right? No need to go into much depth. Whatever the topics that I say to you to read, you can just go and read it, but don't kill your time in knowing what are the things that we have to do. Second thing, no need to write any notes of this. Just have an idea over a period of time. It will be building in your residual knowledge. Then that will be helping. The third thing is, don't think that it will be a supplementary to your Hindu newspaper. You have to read Hindu newspaper at any cost because that is going to have many advantages for you in your comprehension skills as well as in your answer writing skills in GS papers of UPSC. Having said this, let me start with today's SAMEEKSHA. This is today's paper. I have again taken the regional edition, that is called Vijayawada's edition, Visakhapatnam's edition, right, of the Hindu. So let me quickly go through this. What are the things here and which are the things that we have to focus on, right? Without much killing over time, let me quickly enter into this path. Now, the first 3 pages are commercial papers, leave it. Now, this one, China remains as a formidable navy force. Where you can use this? Recently, in internal security, they asked what are the challenges that India is facing in the maritime borders. So, the Navy Chief of India, he himself is saying that India is facing formidable challenge of China. Just remember that. Why? Beijing has maintained a continuous presence in Indian Ocean in the region since 2008, and it is leveraging anti-piracy operations to normalize its naval presence. Right. So you can use this. Army is using, by leveraging its anti-piracy operations, Beijing is encircling India through its policy called encirclement of India, or the so-called string of pearls policy of India. So you can use this. Directly remember this, no need to read much. China is one threat to the borders, along the land borders as well as in the maritime borders, through its string of pearls policy, where you can use this in the so-called India's security point of view. EWS quota does not erode rights of SCs, STs and OBCs, replied by the Center Attorney General, that is called Venugopal. He has answered to the court. We all know this. Discussions in the Supreme Court is going on whether EWS is constitutionally valid or not. In response of the government, Mr. Attorney General of India has given this answer. Leave it, because this is something which will be having relevance in the coming days. Let's wait for the Supreme Court result and then it will happen. Look at this cultural festival, the Tribes Festival. The festival is Langkhan Festival, Langkhon, the Langkhan Festival of Assamese. Langkhan Festival is celebrated by these tribes, and these tribes are known as the Tiwa tribes. So TIWA. Tiwa tribes are present in Assam and they are celebrating this Langkhan Festival. That's it for prelims. Further moving on, this is a regional news. No need to concentrate for UPSC as such. Again, this regional news, leave it. When it comes to one regional news that has relevance in the so-called our UPSC is reforms in the educational sector that Andhra Pradesh government is taking. Right, the Andhra Pradesh Chief Minister Mr. Y.S. Jagan, he has launched the so-called Vidya Vaidyam scheme, that is called Nadu Nedu, and he is concentrating on education in the schools, and he is concentrating on the so-called education, on the so-called health of the people. Now it is being said that it is reforming the so-called educational sector tremendously for the coming days. So Obviously, some political comments that he is accusing the so-called previous government for ignoring the schools' benefit, ignoring as a result corporate institutions have mushroomed in the state. Now he is providing better placements or better facilities in the so-called schools, either in the form of midday meals, either in the form of restructuring, revamping the infrastructure in the schools. This you can use as a very good move by the government of the Andhra Pradesh state. So you can use this in answer writing whenever you have education. In GS paper 2, in GS paper 3 you have education, in GS paper 1 also you can use here and there. Right. So this is something aiming at the so-called welfareistic measures you can write. Tamil Nadu government launched a breakfast scheme. Andhra Pradesh has launched this Nadu Nehru scheme in order to reform this. Very best moves. So you can use this. Today's editorial, one editorial is carrying on this reforms itself. Right. Further moving on. Coming to the editorials, the first editorial is about the so-called the recent deal that the central government of India has made with the armed insurgency in the northeast, that is Nationalist Socialist Council of the Greater Nagaland, NSCN. Assam government, central government and NSCN has entered into this agreement. Now what is the essence for us for UPSC? Again, this can be used in northeast insurgency, how northeast insurgency has come down. It is through discussions that and dialogues that we can overcome any problem rather than force. So this is something which is a very good move by the central government as well as by the so-called armed insurgency groups to reconciliate the matters and settle the disputes in an amicable manner rather than taking arms and ammunition into their hands. So you can write this only in this particular context. The rest of the things are completely fine. One of the reasons why peace deals is very difficult in northeastern part of the country is because unlike other insurgent groups, the northeast insurgent groups called Naga insurgencies, they were splintered in nature. There are many organizations within this Naga insurgency. As a result, this is something difficult because if one group is coming to deal, the other group will be resisting. So whenever internal security or whenever some groups are there inside insurgency, then policing them is a difficult thing, right? This is one thing. What are the reasons for insurgency in northeast? You can write this as one reason. The next one is the northeast states have inter-ethnic relations which are very volatile. Unlike the mainland tribals, the northeast tribals are diverse in its nature. Inter-ethnic relations are present. As a result, this is second reason why to reconciliate something, it is very difficult in the northeastern parts of the country. So this is the material that you can have, or this is the thing that you have to take from this in internal security point. Again, just remember, the reconciliation agreement is a developmental strategy that government of India has tackled. Now the second article is about talking governor, that is the recent media comments that is made by the governor of Kerala, Mr. Arif Khan. He has come before the media and he has criticized the government. So now this article is speaking that yes, in a constitution, governor being the representative of the center, he is the linchpin between the so-called the state government and central government. However, the government which is formed by the so-called people, it should be having majority or it should be having a good say in the so-called democracy because it is a democratic government, right? So he has conducted recently a full-length conference which shows struggle between the center, which shows struggle between the chief minister and the governor's office. Now, governor is an unelected appointee of the central government. He is expected to appreciate the popular mandate of the elected government, which means he has to listen to the so-called aid and advice of council of ministers headed by the chief minister because it is this chief minister's council which is elected by the government. So this is something which is normal. Nonetheless, it has to be noted that electoral majority is the basis for representation, but institutional checks and balances are also integral part. What do you mean by institutional checks and balances? Even the chief minister has to respect the position of the so-called governor because governor is the checks and balance of excess of legislature. So that is the thing. So in constitution, not only it speaks about the so-called legislature, executive, judiciary, but it also speaks about some institutional checks and balances such as the Election Commission of India, the Public Service Commissions, the Finance Commission, and the posts of governor, the posts of speakers in the so-called legislators, the posts of deputy chairmen in the so-called Rajya Sabha, So these things are playing a very crucial role. Hence, you have to go on a balance. There has to be a fine balance between the elected government as well as the checks and balancing institutions, so that we develop, our objective of development will be taking place a different role rather than the so-called personal vengeance. So this is how the institutions has to function in a democratically elected government in any part of the country. So what you can write here, the tussle between the central and state governments, or the tussle between the so-called elected representative, nominated representatives. The second thing is how is both institutions are important, and how they have to come to a conclusion, so that in the ultimate end people will be getting benefited. Reforms in the task of getting teachers on board. This is about the same thing that I said. Andhra Pradesh state government has enacted or embarked upon the so-called rebuilding the so-called infrastructure in the government schools. It is rebuilding the so-called model of education in the government schools. Nonetheless, the author is praising this scheme. At the same time, she is also saying that we have to have enough teachers to ensure that they are meeting to the standards of the objectives that government of Andhra Pradesh has set. So where you can use, no need to go through this. The crux is simple. The crux is simple. That is, along with the teachers. For example, 2 days back, it was reported that in Ekalavya model schools, right, that there is shortage of teachers. Even though there was separate institution which was formed by the central government, that is called NES, NESTS. Right, NES is a societal organization which will be recruiting the teachers, but still there is shortage of teachers. Similarly, this article is speaking about, yes, infrastructure is important, curriculum is important, developing the so-called technology is important in schools. At the same time, the teachers has to be properly trained. Their grievances has to be heard by the state government. That is what it is said. Yes, education should be a collaboration of both government's efforts as well as the teachers' efforts. Without teachers, whatever the infrastructure that you are providing, that is not going to be utilized to the proper extent. So again, this is the thing, no need to go into depth. But what you have to read is just like yesterday's article of AP Shah, who is the real man today. The man is M.K. Narayan. Now what is this? He is speaking about the so-called India's position in this 21st century, particularly how we are located after COVID-19. So positioning India in a chaotic world, right? What is this chaos that is existing in the world? The chaos is, all we know, the Russia-Ukraine war is happening on one side, and the region is very unstable. Many regions are going for wars, such as look at Nagorno-Karabakh region, look at Kyrgyzstan-Tajikistan borders, right? Look at any other parts of the globe, you have quarrel somewhere or the other. In that situation, what is India's stand, or how India is going towards its foreign policy? So where you can use this, you can, particularly this is important for PSIR students, must read article for PSIR students, just like Happy Jacob's article, Geopolitics versus Geoeconomics. This is also one noteworthy thing for PSIR students. But for general studies students, for other optional students, this will be used only in the international relations front at one point, that is called, now India is moving out of the junction called non-alignment. What is non-alignment? During the times of the so-called Cold War, India neither joined the USSR bloc nor joined the so-called US bloc. We stayed aloof, and many countries started joining us. Now the era of this non-alignment is over, and India's foreign policy is being reflected like we are engaging with everyone. Multiple engagement policy is the new order of India. Multiple engagement policy rather than the non-alignment policy, we are following this. What is this multiple engagement policy? The author says that in the SCO summit, Prime Minister Narendra Modi has clearly indicated that to the Russian counterpart, Mr. Putin, that this is not the time of war. Rather, this is the time for the so-called debates and discussions. War cannot happen. As a result, he is giving a clue to Putin that India was not supporting the so-called Russia-Ukraine war. If you look, he also tagged. He is saying that Mr. Narendra Modi has opened a SCO dialogue by saying that he has thanked the both prime ministers of the countries, that is Russia and Putin, as well as the Ukraine counterpart, that he has extended thanks to Ukraine also, saying that they have provided a safe passage for all the Indian students who are located in this conflict zone. So this shows that India is balancing very clearly between the so-called Russia as well as Ukraine. When it comes to Shanghai Cooperation Organization, recently it has happened in the so-called Uzbekistan, a city called Samarkand. I said for prelims this is important to look at this location. I already discussed in our current affairs. Have a look at it. Now, what he is saying is, now China's president. He has made a remarkable statement that China and Russia are going to provide the role of greater power in the coming days. So in this conflict situation, how India is managing? On one side, India is managing the so-called Quad. At the same time, India is managing the so-called SCO. Two counter blocks. We are engaging directly, and we are taking what is India's interest. So this is what we have, and what he is saying is India's position is going to be tested in the coming days, because recently in the SCO summit, Iranian president has extended the so-called his interest to talk with the Indian counterpart, but it is not yet reflected by the Indian government. However, Iran is very important for India for two reasons. One is we are dependent on import of our oil from Iran, which were stopped because of the US sanctions on Iran. The second thing is the Chabahar port that India has constructed prestigiously was not getting utilized because of these sanctions that is imposed by USA. Now the thing is how India is going to manage these conflicting situations and how it is going to come up is a very difficult thing in the coming days. That is called India's position in this chaotic world is something like we are situated sandwiched between two organs. Now we have to wait and see how our policy is there. Now the author also says that India's position so far in the foreign relations is not that active, but it is very passive. And he says that, for example, we abstained from voting on this Russian-Ukraine war, but it has not ended, or it has not yielded any result by abstaining. He is also saying that India has not taken a formidable stand on the Sri Lankan issue, though which is projected by the so-called media on the Sri Lanka or Afghanistan issue. We did not yield a good result as per the author. So which means our foreign policy has to be somewhat active, proactive now, so that we can be engaged as a superpower in this game. Right? This is what this man is saying. So just go through this article, something which you have to read. Particularly PSIR students, this is very much important. Moving on. The growing perils of Bengaluru's missing brains. Now where you can use this, you need to go through this. This is disaster management, why natural hazards are occurring, or why floods are a recurrent event, why many cities are drained under floods. This is a recurrent event in many parts of the city, and these people are speaking about Bengaluru's case. Just remember one thing, this is the encroachment of the so-called natural drains that is causing the floods. So Bengaluru has missed the drains, which means people have encroached into these locations. As a result, the natural flow of the water was disturbed, hence submergence was seen in many cities. So where you can use, just remember, blocking or encroachment of natural drains is one of the reasons for the so-called disasters. Rice wheat push up inflation, but South bucks the trend. No need to go through this, just for prelims perspective, remember what is inflation and concepts of inflation is very much important. Last year, in prelims 2022, they asked almost 6 questions relating to this inflation, but the same trend may continue in the coming days also. So you should know what is inflation, what are the types of inflation, what is CPI, what is WPI, which types of inflation is monitored by the so-called Monetary Policy Committee, what is MPC, how that structure was there. So these are the things that we have to study, right? Along with this, we have to study who gives which type of report: CPI rural, CPI urban, CPI industrial workers, CPI agricultural laborers. So you should know these things, and then you can write some prelims questions, right? So this is something which is important, right? Moving on, no need to study here anything because they have compared with the states. That much analysis is not required for us now. Donations to recognized parties comes under EC scanner. This is something which is, again, yesterday we discussed this. The Chief Election Commissioner of India asked the so-called Law Commission to ensure that the cash donations that are being done to the political parties, registered political parties, will be below rupees 2000, above 2000 rupees. It has to be through electronic media, right? So far, what are the measures that Election Commission of India has taken to clean the election system is unregistered, registered, unrecognized political parties. Registered, unrecognized political parties were removed recently, and now it is focusing on the registered political parties. Now, what it is saying is IT Act. He is saying that Income Tax Act allows cash donations up to 2000 only. However, representation of People's Act says that only the donations which are more than 20,000 has to be reported to the Election Commission of India. Now, this is certain anomaly that exists now. Election Commission of India, Mr. Rajiv Kumar, the Chief Election Commissioner, he is saying that the Indian government has to make both things on par so that the transparency in election system is improved. Where you can use this in the so-called the reforms that Election Commission of India is taking to make or to clean the election process in India. Moving on, in a meeting with Gujarat mayors, Pradhan Mantri stresses development in cities. Now he is speaking about Tier 2 cities and Tier 3 cities. Infrastructure should be developed in the Tier 2 and Tier 3 cities that can help in decreasing the burden of big cities. So, if you are developing Tier 2 and Tier 3 cities, that will create less burden on the so-called Tier 1 cities, which are the mega populated cities like the metropolis, Hyderabad, Madras, Chennai, Bengaluru, Kolkata, Delhi, Mumbai. So these type of cities are known as Tier 1 cities, Tier 2 cities and Tier 3 cities. How do you classify Tier 2 and Tier 3 and Tier 1 based on the population? So Tier 2 and Tier 3 cities are emerging cities which are a transition between the so-called the present day towns towards the so-called mega cities. In that transition zone, whatever the towns are there, they are known as Tier 2 cities and Tier 3 cities. Recently, UPSC asked for a question on the new middle class has been playing a crucial role in the development of Tier 2 cities, right? Which means the emerging trend is from the so-called middle class. The new middle class people are occupying these locations. As a result, infrastructure has to be upgraded. In this, the basic problem in these cities are lack of urban infrastructure such as housing, the so-called roads construction or drainage construction. They have to be done subsequently very good so that India can look at this position. Now, in the first page, there is one article called because of non-inclusion into the ST list, certain tribes of India are agitating against the central government. We have recently heard that 4 tribes were included into the ST list by the central government, but there is one tribe which didn't enter into this, that is called Kurmis. Directly they will ask this question: Kurmis were located in which part of our country? Kurmis were located in Odisha, West Bengal and Jharkhand. In these three, they are located. As a result, they are creating some blocking the railway tracks so that their representation can be heard and they can be going into the so-called ST list. Now, further moving on. No spotted deer brought to Puno as prey for cheetahs. Now, this is about the cheetahs that were brought into Puno Palpur region of Madhya Pradesh. Now, what it is saying is there was certain news which is misread in the so-called media saying that some spotted deers were bought from the so-called Rajasthan in order to, and they were reintroduced, they were introduced in the so-called Puno Palpur region so that they will become a prey for the so-called the leopards that we have bought. Now, the ministry is clearing that we have not bought any Punos for the prey of cheetahs. Now, what is this? Why I have said this? This is important for prelims. Cheetahs are spot deers from Rajasthan. This is the state animal of Rajasthan. Oh, sorry, not state animal. Cheetah or spotted deer is from Rajasthan. They were bought. Recent news saying that Puro National Park in Madhya Pradesh. But what they are saying is this is wrong. Now, what is this so speciality about cheetah or spotted deer? There is one community in Rajasthan called Bisnoy community who is playing a crucial role in conservation of these species. Bisnoy community is noted or known for conservation of this particular species that is called cheetah or spotted deer. Right. So you have to remember this for prelims. Bisnoy communities in Rajasthan. Cheetahs or spotted deers are majority of them are located in Rajasthan. However, the ministry is saying that we didn't do this because in Madhya Pradesh itself there are some parks such as the Satpura National Park, Sanjay Gandhi National Park, Nauradehi National Park and Puno National Park. In these national parks itself, there was some translocation of spotted deers or cheetahs. This is done as a regular exercise, but not an exercise to increase the prey for the so-called the newly bought leopards. Now, what is another thing that is important? Which is the main prey for the so-called leopards? Sambar deers and cheetah are the main prey for PREY for the so-called leopards, sambar deer and cheetahs. Now, what is the crux of this? This is for prelims. Cheetahs or spotted deers, Bisnoy community, the national parks that are present in Rajasthan, the national parks that are present in Madhya Pradesh, and what is the prey for the so-called leopards, that is sambars or cheetahs, right? And cheetahs, both things. Now, you can also use this in the so-called essay writing. How you can use this? Now, imagine this scenario: you have got 4 leopards or 8 leopards. Sorry, you have got 8 leopards from the so-called Namibia, and you have introduced them. Right, until 1951. By 1951, Indian leopards were extinct in the country. Now imagine this scenario. You have got some extinct species from different parts of the country, different parts of the continent, and you have introduced in our subcontinent. Now, in order to provide them the food, you are using or translocating some cheetahs or the so-called deers. Now, this appears something like interfering into the nature, where you are forcibly making some animals to get threatened from the so-called the big cats. So you can use this as an argument in some areas. Now look, in the quest for making some animals to survive, you are endangering the lives of some other things. Though it appears like it is nature, but Indian government, it is the intervention of humans that might start some mismatch. Right? You can write this controversy in some introduction stars, how life is being seen from different perspectives. In ethics or essay, you can use it. But beyond that, no much thing important. 14 dead sperm whales founded in Australian island. The island name is Kings Island of Australia, which is a part of Tasmania in Bass Strait. There is one strait, Tasmania Strait, Bass Strait, and this is found in the state of Tasmania. That is 14 whales are killed, and you have to know, we have to remember this. Climate change is causing threat to some animals, right? You can use this here and there. So now move on. Consultant Iran crackdown of protest. Now this is because this is related to Masha Amini's death in the Iran. She was forcibly taken away by the so-called moral policing of Iranian police. Now she went into coma because of the treatment of these police officers, and she finally passed away. And I said this yesterday, in their funeral, in her funeral, the agitations has happened, and people started coming on and revolting. Now the government of Iran, they have reacted in a very harsh manner to these protests. As a result, in these protests, almost there have been 4 protesters who were killed or who passed away in this protest, and dozens were injured. Now the human rights commissioners at the so-called located in Geneva, they are expressing the concerns. Now where you can use about the privacy of individuals, the dignity of individuals, these cases, right? United Nations Chief Mr. Antonio Guterres say that the world is in peril. Today the world is in great peril. Why he said this is, we are in a great peril because Russia-Ukraine war, multiplicity of conflicts that is happening around us. At the same time, climate emergency is present here. And then because of COVID-19, many developing nations went to the so-called financial crisis. This is another problem. And because of all these things, whatever the success that we have achieved, that UN has achieved, maybe in the Millennium Development Goals, where poverty levels were reduced, where hunger was reduced, this was again reversed, which means the achievements that we got reversed. That is what he is explaining. Recent reversals of progress on such as UN goals as ending extreme poverty and providing education for all has been lost. So what are the major issues in globe? Just remember this: Russia-Ukraine war, multiple wars which are happening, climate emergencies, financial emergencies in the developing countries, and the reversal of the achievements that UN has got, either it is in the form of education or in the form of the so-called removal of poverty or hunger across the world. So what is the way forward? The way forward is there should be cooperation and dialogue is the only path, and no country or no one country or a group of countries can fall for the shots. Now, not only this, many multipolar institutions are gridlocked and they are becoming dysfunctional. This is also one problem of the world. What do I mean by this? Multipolar institutions such as the so-called United Nations, World Health Organizations, WTO, WHO, these type of institutions are gridlocked and they have become dysfunctional over the years. This is something again which is the growing trend of the world. This is the world that we are looking. Yesterday I said that the world's population is almost 8.5 billion, which might be crossing 9 billion by 2030. Given this scenario, there is impending food crisis, there is impending dangers which are threatening the world. So the world is very uncertain today. Hence, what is the major thing that we have to do as a global citizens or in order to protect this Vasudhaiva Kutumbakam? The only thing is cooperation, not conflict is the answer. As Prime Minister Narendra Modi has said, the era of conflict is over. This has to be, all our disputes has to be settled through discussions and dialogues. Thus flags issues with the so-called digital lending such as data privacy rates. Now recently RBI government along with the finance ministry, they are into one exercise that is called regulating the digital lending platforms. There are many digital lending platforms. Everyone is coming forward and offering that we will give you credit, we will give you some finance, take it. After giving that, then they are coming after us. So RBI is cracking down on these type of institutions because it is saying that with the digital lending, though technology is helping to reach to the common man, but there are some spate of issues such as compromising of personal data and high interest rates that is being done by this digital institutions, digital payment institutions, and unethical recovery practices, right? They will take away your land, they will take away your property, they will harass you. So these things are present and privacy issues are still present. These are the problems with digital lending, right? Now, so what they are asking is we have to increase the so-called responsibility and enhance the efficiency and transparency of these digital transforms. Hence, this is very important. Now, he has used the word called we have to crack down those institutions or those digital lending companies which are causing a great harm to the so-called humans, and they are classified as green listing or white listing, and due diligence on these type of institutions should be taken. So they might ask this term, green listing is in use, white listing is in use. What does this mean? This means those institutions, digital institutions who are acting in an unethical manner are named under this green listing or white listing. This is something which is related to digital payments. Just remember that is for prelims. Now, so this is the news for the day. So thanks for joining. Just focus on these things. Go through MKNRN article and the rest of the things is no need to write. Just remember where you can apply what. So this is for the day. I will quickly make one video on today's current affairs. Right? Thanks for joining. You have a good day.